Welcome back to the Mom Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And we're very excited to have back on the show James Herr. We had a really good time with him last time, and he's got some more topics for us. So we're super excited to have him on this time to talk through some kind of mobbing patterns, kind of similar maybe to the Gang of Four type patterns, but for mobbing. And if you've seen some previous episodes on this topic from this, we love this. This is like, bread and butter mob mentality stuff. So we're super excited to have James come on the show to talk about Fly on the Wall, Knee-High Navigator, Runaway Driver, and maybe some others. We get to it. But before we jump to those, if people are meeting you for the first time, James, do you mind giving us a brief introduction?
Yeah, you bet. I do want to say I'm a little sick and awkward as heck, so I apologize in advance to your viewers. Uh, but yeah, my name is James. I've been with Flexion for about 3 years now. I've always had a career-long passion for collaboration, and I played a pivotal role in getting swarming sessions set up at my last two jobs. And since then, I've discovered mobbing, which was a pretty huge level up from swarming. So I was pretty happy about that. Uh, for context, at Flexion, I'm on a guild squad for specializes in teaching and practicing ensemble programming. So my squad mates and I have been collecting these anti-patterns, we're calling them, since Flexion's a very pro ensemble organization. These are mostly situational and thought-provoking, but we found that people enjoy hearing us talk about them and kind of poking holes in them, and chances are they run into them quite a bit during their day-to-day and maybe don't realize that they're living in the middle of one of them. So there's some good opportunity there for them to enhance their ensemble effectiveness. So I'm hopeful to go through these, reflect on them, kind of lean on your guys' expertise along the way, because I'm sure you guys have some good thoughts on them, and go from there. How does that sound?
Awesome. Let's do
Yeah.
it. Let's dig into the first one. Tell us about Fly on the Wall.
All right, fly on the wall, as you might guess. This is when someone joins a session but doesn't necessarily want to participate. They just watch.
Sure.
This is typically for engineers, so any other roles, this isn't necessarily for them. Now, it doesn't seem too harmless, but what we've noticed with the observer is they end up not learning as much, can be disruptive to the flow potentially, and it can create some stage fright for the person watching. So what we think is it's good to warmly welcome the newcomers as soon as they pop in and make it clear that we're going to include them. Sometimes I personally like just putting them right on the timer, being real assertive about it. Um, other things can be like scheduling breaks because learning's exhausting, especially if you're new to the process. And sometimes the mini retro check-ins throughout the day is good too. Just ask them how they're doing.
Nice.
So that's the first one. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I can jump in there a little bit.
yeah, you bet.
I think even in the very earliest of times when I was in a learning session, and there was this was in a organization that did not have a culture of any collaboration, but it was the first time that we would start mobbing. This was, kind of. Before mobbing was a term, really. And someone there was like, I don't feel comfortable contributing at all. Um, and, did not want to be on the rotation explicitly and things like that. One thing that I did notice happen is that eventually they came around and said, okay, go ahead and add me into the rotation after a few sessions. So I had seen that before, but again, it wasn't really common, and it was a learning session in a kata, and they had never done any programming where simultaneously, and so they were. I think in the end, it would be reasonable to say that they were afraid to. Do you see that, or is there something anchoring your context a little bit more to the point where you wouldn't want to do that, or how does that come up?
How does the fly on the wall come up?
Yeah, yeah,
It's very situational. So it could be we just formed a new group that week. It could be we just got a new hire. It definitely varies,
yeah.
especially team to team. Um, I can think of at least half a dozen times where maybe we had a new member, but we were just kind of in the groove, so we didn't like probably do our best to just get him into the rotation
Sure,
or
yeah.
ask him what their preference is. So definitely, I have my own opportunities there to do better next time.
Yeah. And I think Um, I have seen the fly in the wall go poorly, like you've talked about before,
Right.
um, James. And I think the combination of here's this pool and there's a way to wade in, and here's the deep end. Trust us, we're gonna push you in, but it's gonna be okay. Like, here's a life raft. We're gonna have a mini retro. We're gonna check in and make sure things are going okay, make adjustments for you. I think that combination has t tended to go really well in my experience. So, for example, we have like a visitor to a mob, um, and um, yeah, kind of pushing them in the deep end, but being very like white glove service oriented. Like, okay, we just went through a few rotations. Is there anything we can do to help your visit of this mob or you're joining this mob? We know you're new. There's a lot of things. Kind of give them, I don't know, superb customer experience, so to speak, for fixing any problems they have. I think that would probably accelerate the kind of storming, forming, norming phases of a team, where I think in general, the less that someone is talking or engaging on the keyboard or doing anything, it's easier for all the disengagement negative patterns to kick in. And so, yeah, I think I support your mode often because I think while you can't guarantee it, uh, often if you do it with white glove and mini retros, it'll probably go well. But I think with Chris, I have seen it before where someone, um, I think it probably it's just like any design pattern. The context matters greatly, right? And so if if someone is super eager to mob and they just want to see it happen a few times before they join, it's usually fine because they'll join after an hour or five rotations or something. However, if someone is really just kind of window shopping, they're not really going to experience it because they're just window shopping. It's kind of like watching people play baseball versus playing baseball with them, right? And
Right.
you might think, oh, that looks terrible for him to be standing that way when he hits the ball, when really he's like, no, it's fine. You know what I mean? And so, um, yeah, yeah, that's some random thoughts for you.
Oh, I love that. The customer experience after a few rotations, definitely I'll put that one in there. That's awesome.
Yeah,
So
I think in the context I'm referring to, it was very much like that person did not want to be doing this, and they were being coached into doing it. Um, and so, sometimes there is like the getting your feet wet sort of thing, but you also can easily get into that mode where, the rest of the team has flow, and then um, they're not really connecting, otherwise. And so, or they're just kind of like watching and fly on the wall sort of thing. And so, in which case, like the inviting is really good for that too. And then, of course, the person, that hopefully is listening on the edge of their seat would also be willing to jump in at some point. Because there were times where I was with people that didn't want to be mobbing, but were in the mob that then were like, oh no, do it this way. And then all of a sudden they started to open up and things like that. So usually if like you're working in a place where they're an expert, but you're working on it, learning it, then if you can create a situation where they're teaching you, I think it helps a lot with that issue.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. The one I have up next is actually the newcomer, which I have a little solution for that, I think, or a possible solution. Before we roll to that one, I had a question about non-engineers on your mobs. Per se, I like having them in the room. I think it's a really fun area to experiment in. Do you guys see that in your day-to-day much? Like, do you have
We
a product owner, scrum master, something on the call with you most of the time?
Yeah, so lately, not so much, but we did have a product owner eventually become a software engineer by mobbing with the team and doing both a lot of the time. And so they were also kind of quite technical beforehand. Um, I actually went into a mob today where the product owner was working on figuring out their like current, hardware. We work on IoT devices, and so it was their current hardware and software lining up together. And so there's a lot of collaboration in that way. But it's typically abnormal lately for them to be interacting with a team outside of stand-ups. But when we were in person, we had a wide variety. We had people that they saw daily or people that were there all the time, weekly or monthly. And so I like to tell people that, depending on how often the product owner is available is usually a heavy indicator of the health of that team. And we had a very stark contrast between those teams when we were in person. So I like that.
Very cool.
I don't know, Austin, you got any more?
Yeah, I think it varies widely. I've had times where full-time product owner type person or stakeholder type person in the mob, scheduled times, high frequency the better. Ad hoc has been really good too.
Yep.
Sometimes it's like, here's a new thing, we want your feedback. Oh, we got that part wrong. Oh, let's change that. Okay, great, thanks. Call them back 15 minutes later, an hour later. Oh, here's another thing. What do you think about that? And then they're just constantly available. I've seen them be a fly on the wall. I've heard of that partially, where they see what the mob is doing, like they have a window into it, via a tool like AnyDesk or something. But then when they see something weird, they'll jump in. Um, I've seen it go poorly as well with mobbing. Mobbing doesn't guarantee all the good practices to happen, where, as Chris mentioned, sometimes the product owner interaction or client feedback of any kind was months separated from the mob, and that definitely went poorly. And so, yeah, I've seen it. I think the happiest thing I've seen is when it's multiple times a day, in the very lean way when it's needed, at least that. The full time is optimal because they'll show that they're needed more than you think. That's quite radical, but the value in naming a method, for example, is the name of the method is better when there's someone with great domain knowledge there. Um, but at least as needed, and that's typically multiple times a day if you're working in an XP continuous delivery fashion, has gone quite well in an ad hoc fashion. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
That ends up being a frequent topic at work here, so I wanted to see your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So these anti-patterns I mentioned, we have Thursdays to kind of go through guilds and topics, and it's kind of like our learning day. Do you guys have something similar in place that you do on a specific day or hour to teach mobbing related practices?
It was much more frequent in the past, where so right now a lot of it is expansion on technology use and other things along those lines. But yeah, as far as the dedicated learning time, it's kind of not necessarily lately been focused on mobbing patterns or anything along those lines. But um, we've also had no turnover at all in the last 2 years. So that's also been yeah. So the teams that have been together over that time have kind of there's not a lot of like of that sort of skill coming up a lot.
Yeah,
But
fair
it,
enough.
it, it does happen here and there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it happens in an ad hoc fashion kind of all the time and then kind of not all the time. So there's some groups that meet up uh weekly or that will topics like that will come up. Or you just see a chat between four people and they're talking about a mob pattern without saying it's a mob pattern.
Right. Yep.
So it's just kind of almost the water we're swimming in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oh, we can talk about the newcomer. It's pretty close to the last one, but I'll go through it regardless.
Yeah.
Nice. Please do.
As you might imagine, so the newcomer is the new person on the team, whether it's, I guess, new to the team domain or maybe the language itself. The risk there is overwhelming exclusion, and they can feel completely lost again. So once again, we recommend to create an environment where it's safe to express knowledge gaps, like psychological safety is obviously super important. Like for myself, I'm very much fond of like if I'm going to learn about the domain or the language or whatever the case is, like one thing I recommend is just focus on what matters in the moment and not fire hose them with the whole puzzle. Like they don't need to know everything all at once because chances are, at least for me, I'll rotate none of it. Like just bite-sized domain knowledge, I think is the win there.
Right.
Yeah. So one solution I also recommend for new teams is to start the day with like an hour of a kata or some sort of a learning hour. So you can put everyone on an even playing field, and you can really get to go know each other really, really well.
Yeah,
But
I think that like one thing I noticed is that really experienced developers that we've hired from a context that doesn't do pairing or mobbing, they're often just not used to saying the code out loud. Or even like, recent college grads, we've seen this a lot where they'll join the team and then they'll be uncomfortable navigating, but not because they didn't know the answer, but or know a path forward, but they didn't even know how to verbalize or have the vocabulary to say the thing to navigate. And so often, especially for that type that this is self-described, I think in code type, where it's like a lot of iterations in the code before they kind of come up with that. So one thing that I think helped a lot was basically navigating the navigator over chat or just sitting next to them and whispering to them what might come next in the navigation or how to phrase something, like having a side conversation about how to say the next step has been really helpful. So just practicing the vocabulary and not so much thinking about all the other things that you have to think about when writing software. Um, and I guess the other thing is like Willem Larson talked a lot about being on the fluent edge. And, if there's lots of things that you have to learn, like say it's somebody completely new to, cloud infrastructure, at the same time new to mobbing, at the same time new to, like they're joining their team as a very inexperienced developer. Uh, I think there is something about singling out one of those items and learning about that and building up, muscles around that and then going through the list of things, taking them one at a time rather than, to deal with the overwhelm, right? Yeah.
yep,
Nice.
absolutely. Yeah, that answered everything so thoroughly. I don't all my follow-up questions are answered. So
I think the one thing I'll throw in there that's maybe lurking in the background here that I think, if my understanding of design patterns and patterns in general is correct, is often why pattern language and pattern thinking works so well with something like code design, and I think this is kind of like people design, people collaboration design, is that from a Cynefin mindset, we are not in like a simple or clear or even complicated space. We're in a complex space, chaotic space, um, where the ability to upfront plan that a pattern will or will not work is probably pretty low. But what's valuable with patterns, both with code and with mobbing, is you can kind of do the thing when you're in chaotic or complex space, is you act, you do something. You probe, you act, you sense and you respond and you adjust, right? And so I think it's wonderful that you've named these patterns because it gives something for someone to try. And if you know other patterns that also apply to the scenario, um, so for example, I might, a newcomer, just push them into the deep end because we're just acting, from a Cynefin model, doing something. We're in a chaotic space, it might work. And they might do great. They don't need a kata to start with. Or they feel very overwhelmed by 50 things. And then the kata is a great way to take that work in progress of 50 and bring it down to one. You know what I mean? And so the ability to experiment with the pattern in your context and, you know, instead of upfront planning which one will work, you can make a best guess and try one. But then being ready to flex to a different pattern as the situation needs, I think it is quite critical. So that's not an argument for or against the first two patterns you give. It just shows that there's probably some contexts where these work great, and there's other contexts where you're going to switch to a different, pattern for a newcomer or something like that. Yeah. What do
yeah,
you think? Yeah.
absolutely. It's all very thought-provoking, and there's like you said, experimentation's like very key to the whole process, right? Without that,
Yeah.
it's hard to grow at
Hmm.
all. And same for mini retros, because then you can get the experiments happening every day or weekly. I guess it depends, but
Yeah.
it's definitely the I think the secret ingredient to the whole process.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's keep going down your list. I love talking through each one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what's your next pattern here?
So this next one, I thoroughly enjoy the name. So this one is Knee-High Navigator. This happens when the navigator gives really detailed low-level instructions, like telling them
Nice.
exactly what keys to press. This can stifle
Love it.
creativity, frustrate the driver, and then you go on autopilot because you're just a typing machine, right? Then uh, I feel like I run into this one pretty often, and I'm still trying to master speaking high level, right? Because it's definitely doesn't come easy to everybody, especially as we get more and more into the AI world. High level
Hmm.
speech is becoming more and more important. It's crazy how many like the ripple effect of how that skill can be applied. Um, what we recommend for navigators is starting obviously with the high level intent. For me personally, I like to prefix all my navigation with at a high level, and then I say the rest. So it's like a mental reminder to myself, but a subtle nudge to the rest of the group that's what we're aiming for. Um, uh, it's
Nice.
good to allow the driver to be uncomfortable, and for the drivers, it's good to reply back on what you heard, or like, this is what I heard. Like, is this what you had in mind? If you're confused, ask questions, and if you're overwhelmed by too much details, it's okay to say, I need low level direction. Is that okay? Obviously. So I have some other quick fixes that I like for these, or things to help people master this skill. So we have a planning process we do at the beginning of our story where we co-write tasks, right? So everyone's allowed to edit the task list in the same moment. So we might it's kind of like prompting, right? So we write the task and then we slowly refine the words until it's high level. Like maybe someone to put add string property and we're like, let's pull string out. Let's just say add property, or like we'll massage it until it fits the pattern we're thinking of. And then additionally, like I said, working with AI is a very excellent way to master your high level speech and typing. So for you guys then, do you find yourself helping others master this technique, and how do you go about nudging others along, or reflect on it?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, what I see a lot more of now, well, yeah, so I think the driver, in the context of like, mobbers that have been mobbing together for 2 years, what I see is just the direct feedback, like higher navigation, please. I can't, I can't take this right now. Um, but some of the patterns that I think I've used, and I really like the knee-high navigator. It's a really funny term. I love it. The one thing that we might do is put the high level into chat or on a Kanban, which typically ends up being really good. And I think what I see a lot of people struggle with is actually commit messages in the same way of like, what was the high level that we did for these files that we just manipulated? And so that's also been really interesting. But you're right, the AI can summarize what you did, but in the after the fact, but it can't summarize what you want before the fact. So there's probably two sides to the same coin there. Um, I also think that uh, we as a as a department really have talked many times before about higher level navigation, and especially like I commonly refer to vocabulary. It's right. So when people, I think vocabulary is super important for any software developer, whether they know it or not. And it's become especially more important now because in the AI world, every token is valuable. And so if you can say things as succinctly as possible with as much context and detail as possible, then you're really hitting that correct note, right? Um, where when you're interacting with people, there's probably a lot of back and forth, like a very simple description and a misinterpretation, and then like, what did you mean by that? And you go back and forth and back and forth. And so often in like one-on-ones and things with people, I'll say, I hear that I know that you know the pattern, like the design pattern, maybe the strategy pattern. I know you know strategy pattern. You've navigated me in it before, but you do not use the term strategy pattern. And so you spend a lot of time describing what you want when you could just say implement the strategy pattern for this thing. And I've given that feedback countless times now in various scenarios whenever I can see it. And so I think being really good with vocabulary and descriptions, and then also having that vocabulary reflected back to you is like super important. And it helps a lot with this because, and even in the knee-high navigator scenario, as a navigator, presumably you could say, how would you say that at a higher level? And then how would you say that at an even higher level, or backlog grooming, like you said?
Yeah, one thing we've noticed with writing those tasks is that like after they're done, it's not too far into the how. It just says kind of what, but it's defined enough where you can hand it to anybody and they're like, "Oh, I know. I kind of know what I need to do for that." So, right?
Yeah,
Because they're not vague, but they're not low level. It's like a perfect balance as we slowly master the skill.
yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Nice.
How about you,
Yeah.
Austin? Do you run into this at all in your world?
Yeah, definitely. A small example of when I think it applies is we were writing, it was either a commit message or the name of a test, but it's basically in the form of a sentence. And the navigator had expressed his high level intent well. But as I was writing it, I was discovering parts that were missing or needed to be added on. So I would start writing the beginning of the sentence and then remember something that needs to go into the end, like if we're doing it should win, style BDD. And I jump to the end and add some context of the scenario, and they interpreted it as a misunderstanding of the high level navigation and started low level navigating. No, go back to the sentence and write this word, then this word, then this word, and there is a time and place for that, but at that moment it was just kind of like, nope, I got it. I'm just adding something in as well to yes and to what you're saying. And so, like Chris said, sometimes direct feedback is just like sometimes I'm just mistyping, or I'm going to do the sentence in reverse order because that's how my mind works. And I remember someone once said, after you navigate, just wait a bit. Even if it looks like they're messing up, give it a little time. And they may
Yeah.
not be just messing up, but they may just be translating the high level navigation into low level navigation at a different rate or a different order than you.
Well, that's
Um,
just real quick.
yeah.
You actually run into that with agentic AI. And so I was watching the Microsoft
Mm.
Copilot video on their thing, and the instructor of that video was like, you have to let the AI cook. And and so he's like, if you watch it, it's like watching water boil, and it'll actually go down the wrong path and then realize that it was wrong and come back. But humans do that too. And so I think that what we're seeing in the AI world is, especially in the agentic AI, when if you watch what it's doing, it's making a bunch of mistakes and going back just like a person would. Um, and so if you stare at, if you're obsessing over like, okay, well, we got to fix that right away, right away, right away, then the whole system becomes overwhelmed, and no
Yeah.
one likes dealing with that, right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
let it
And
cook's that's such a good phrase.
yeah.
We run into that. Like people don't realize that it is gonna cook and like it's gonna test itself. So like people are like, "Gotta kill it. Let's look at it." I'm like, well, maybe give it a minute to run the test first and see if it figures it out. Sorry,
mm.
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, no, that's great. Yeah, and I think it applies with navigating humans too. And yeah, and I think you're just waiting for that break point. Like, oh, they've finished the sentence and they're moving on to the next line. Okay, that's the time to jump in and be like, I think you misunderstand my high level intent. Do you mind if we drop a level down and
Right.
the grammar is off here, this variable, not that variable, or something like that. Um, and the other thing I'll add is over time, I've become less, I don't know if the word's dogmatic, but that high level navigation must be the first thing learned when they're mobbing. Um, because sometimes when someone's learning to mob, including myself, especially when the cognitive load is high and the problem you're solving is very hard and it's chaotic, sometimes the only way you can cut through the madness is to do some mid to low level navigation. Because you're like, okay, I don't understand anything else, but I know there's a string and the string has to be manipulated this way. How it relates to the domain, I don't know, my head would explode. All right, and you just let them cook at the mid to low level, and then you discover the high level afterwards. And maybe you discover what you just solved has nothing to do with the problem we're trying to solve. And then we just like, oh, that was an interesting string experiment. Let's throw it away. Or you discover, oh, okay, so that relates to the high level thing this way. And then let's rename the test to be about the high level thing, and so you kind of come back to the high level. And then you teach high low level navigation through after a while of low level navigating as well. And so it's kind of like you get there, but you don't get there immediately. You let the low level navigation go for a while. At least as a driver, I'll do that. Like let them low level navigate me. And yeah.
That's the trouble with mobbing in general, is that you have the problem of learning theft, and this idea of like, if you solve it for somebody before they realize the mistake, then there's skepticism about the validity of the mistake identified.
Hmm.
Where if you let them get to the end and they understand the mistake, then it will live with them longer and it'll be longer term learning. And I've even been told that I've corrected people too quickly and I have therefore stolen their learning. Learning theft is something that you have to be very careful for, especially and to an extent, that's the trouble with patterns as well, right? So if somebody reads the Gang of Four design patterns book and then they go and implement them, never having experienced the problem in the first place. I remember having a master's class where people did not believe that the patterns were necessary, or it wasn't believable that these problems would exist in the real world. Luckily, having already been in the industry, I was able to kind of like say, no, actually, you see this all the time. And so the trouble with patterns is that they're very hard to understand why they were established in the first place. And often people are being asked to use a pattern that they don't necessarily have any context for. So starting with why, the Simon Sinek stuff, start with why might also be a good pattern.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, you mentioned earlier that give 3 seconds after navigation to kind of let them chew on it for a minute. That's definitely me because I'll click on like six things before my brain even picks up what I heard. So usually the navigator's like, no, 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 and I'm like, I'm still processing. I'm just clicking, you know. Uh, so I definitely embody that one quite a bit.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's kind of like lean processing, right? You want the batch size to be just right, like too small, and you're giving feedback too early. And I do the same thing, James. Whenever my wife and kids see me on the come over and look what I'm doing, if I'm like, doing something slow on the keyboard, they're like, "Why is your mouse moving about wildly? You're not even clicking anything over there." You know what I mean? Like, why are you scrolling up? And it's just like I'm thinking, but I'm like moving the mouse around as I'm thinking, and so it
Uh, I get
looks very yeah.
I get that feedback so frequently. If I'm
Yeah.
presenting, my mouse is going just nuts. They're like, "Are you okay?" Like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the batch size of learning theft, I would guess, depends on your context, right?
Yeah.
So let them cook, or let it cook. Could be months and years of terrible mistakes if it's a code school, and the impact of
Yeah.
the destructive thing is, whatever. It's just throwaway toy code. If you're working in a production environment where you don't want to ship bugs today, the batch size of feedback might have to be before it gets pushed. And maybe that stole the learning, because they would have learned better if it would have blown up on a customer. But I guess you have to weigh it out. Are we more of like a code school, or are we more of we want to ship high quality daily? And so at that point, I think you do have to steal some learning a little bit, depending on your context, as far as waiting to get feedback. But anyways, any other thoughts before moving on to potentially another pattern?
Yeah, I'll jump to the next one. You guys are giving me good notes, so I appreciate this.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you too. Thank you.
So the next one also has a name that delights me. This one's Runaway Driver. Um, Basically, this is when the driver ignores the navigator and just implements their own idea or goes completely quiet. So you may hear nothing for the whole rotation. Uh, so if you do see this, the navigator, the squad has some recommendations. We suggest a quarantine and combine, where everyone goes solo, solves the problem at hand, and then comes back in like 10 minutes. That's usually pretty fun.
Nice.
Uh, this can shorten the timer. Is a good one too, because then your driver is kind of limited to that time. Um, but the good old-fashioned gentle but firm reminder that it's the own-soul's turn to navigate, I think is good. As for the drivers, if you do find yourself in this spot, repeat back what you heard, obviously is a good one. And if you disagree with the direction, you might just have to come to terms with letting yourself be navigated off a cliff, right? Just let it happen. I mean, think that's okay. Um, we also like to encourage traffic cops as if the team's psychologically safe enough for that. Just be like, hey, remember so and so's navigating. Kind of a subtle nudge from the rest of the group. Something I find helpful too is the floating cards on the screen of whose role it is at the time. I do like those as well. Is that sometimes it's easy to lose track of that. Any reflection on this one? How do you go about reeling in a runaway driver?
Well, at times, I think often, um, like one thing that I see often that mobs are doing is they'll swap rather than using a timer to switch places, they use, conceptual or like a unit test creation versus a implementation of a solution, ping-ponging other things. So sometimes people jettison the timer to help deal with that. Um, and so if they are just kind of like doing their own thing, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but runaway driver to me means that the person at the keyboard is kind of doing their own thing and ignoring navigation. Um, at that point, I would say, hey, it really looks like you know what you want to be doing. Why don't you navigate and I'll drive? And so keeping them off of the keyboard, because I think the important thing here is that the code is verbalized and then everyone speaks a roughly equal amount of time. And so if this person navigates too much now, then you then like keep them quieter later. But if it's a repeat offense, then that's when you get into the conversation of like, okay, well, how do we improve these things, right?
Yeah,
Nice.
I'd say that's a really good one. I like the ask them to drive and have them navigate. I'd say when I run into these, typically it is repeat offenders. How do you go about tackling that?
I don't know, Austin, do you have any?
Yeah, and actually that goes segues quite nicely what I was going to talk about. So, I've addressed it directly before, just to be like, hey, let's maybe mini retro time. What mobbing pattern are we doing here? Is this kind of like is the navigator navigating, or is the driver doing their own thing? I've done that before. Um, there's also kind of a yes and style that I'll get to your question in just a second. Where if I look at it from a lens of is the mob collaborating such that everyone is putting their cards on the table to come up with the best product, right? The best code, the best product, um, and worrying less about the strong style aspect of mobbing. Glorious benefits, but sometimes I've seen good things happen where a driver takes the wheel and shows us something. You know what I mean? And so if I sometimes I'll let it go, yes, and onto it, and then just ask them to become a facilitating driver. Basically, say instead of coding quietly, and we just watch you, tell us out loud as you're typing what you're doing and why. And then we'll ask questions or something like that as you're going for the duration of their turn. And typically, what happens is people will start collaborating, and then strong style will start happening again, or the collaboration is happening. It doesn't really matter who's driving. Whoever is at the wheel is just kind of implementing the group discussion, which I think is the goal. But there is the time where it's not a short instance of I'm writing and you're all watching and there's no collaboration. It's they just keep doing it perpetually all day long. Um, and that at that point, I think I think it's basically a stop the line retro moment in my experience. It's just kind of like I think the benefit of us all being here is we can all weigh in. And how would you like to operate, or would you prefer to go solo code? Because while I love mobbing, I will fight for your right to go solo code as long as you get a code review later or something like that. It's not optimal in my opinion, but I'm not going to force you into mobbing if you don't want to. If you do want to mob with us, here's some things we can try. Strong style, strict navigation, or even if you do, the driver implements their thoughts, you could turn it into evil TDD ping pong, which naturally will force collaboration, where like Chris was talking about. If they really want to, navigate and drive, well, they're only going to write the test, or they're only going to write the implementation, or only the refactor step, and then it switches to someone else, right? And so that will um, unlock collaboration, so to speak. But um, yeah, I think I remember. Yeah, there was. I think someone's impression from watching a persistent runaway driver was, I think this person really doesn't want to mob and they don't want to say it, and maybe that's what's going on under the surface, or it just might be habits and them doing the thing they normally do. I don't know.
So I just want to do a time check here. We're kind of running out of time. I do
Oh,
want to hear a little bit about the Super Navigator, and maybe we can continue this conversation on another series of these. But
Mhm.
yeah, what are your thoughts there?
for Super Navigator, yeah, I can go through this one quick. Basically, it's when the navigator dominates the whole conversation. They have all the domain knowledge, and you really have a hard time getting another word in. And if you do have a word you want to get in, right? Maybe that navigator's three topics down the road before you can really find a natural pause to jump in and say something. So, uh, I agree with what Austin said at the last one. Like that's might be a good spot for a hard line. Like let's fix it in the moment.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but that's the short and sweet of it. So I assume you
Awesome.
guys run into this uh, frequently as well.
Yeah, I think so. For the Super Navigator, somebody that's navigating all the time, it is a question about like, sometimes I'll even say, hey, why don't you take some time off and see how it goes? Because it's one of the lofty goals that we have is everyone should be able to take a vacation at any time without any negative repercussions of that. And so if people feel uncomfortable by that statement, then that often is a good indicator. But do you have anything to share or plug before we close out the episode?
Oh, I really don't. I
All
appreciate the
right.
time here, and it was awesome to gather some notes on these particular anti-patterns. So I appreciate the time.
Yeah. Are you considering publishing these anywhere?
I might
Yeah.
post a LinkedIn post or two. I've posted a
All
few,
right.
but I'm sure there'll be more.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, to our audience members out there, if anybody is a runaway driver or a knee-high navigator, maybe sending them this episode might help. If you want to share this with them, don't take it as a subtle insult or anything. And please join us. And then James, it's been great having you on the show again, and we'll see everybody later. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Everybody.
you.